that's one of the things that I think is great about Cashflow Buddha and Shelter, because you do have a decent amount of guests, but not an overload. But I think it still is very reflective of what you've been doing, especially the last several years, where I think your music has had, as we've talked about on our last interviews, the more social commentary to it, I think, but also the music, I'd say, has evolved significantly from what you were doing with Lone Catalyst back when I first met you in the 90s.
Yeah,
So it's a
yeah.
very different evolution, and I think a great one. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, and that ties, into Find the Means, it ties into all these different songs. But like even with the 50 years of hip hop, which we had discussed briefly the last time, but
Yeah.
I think too the the thing I've been wondering about, and the thing that that song reminds me of, and shout out to obviously Master Ace on there as well, and RJ Payne, but the being able to blend and use the lyrics from like the Tough Crew
Hmm.
or Poison Clan or whoever.
Yeah.
So, and to your point, the importance of shouting them out. Um, so even just to recognize them, why is that so valuable? Like Busy Bee, you have on the record, Tough Crew, RJ Payne just shouts out. So what's the
Well,
balance?
it's keeping a record. It's just like every bar that a rapper says that's real, and I guess describing something is keeping a record of the Tough Crew. Okay, they mentioned the Tough Crew in that song, so the Tough Crew must be important. Let's research the Tough Crew. You know what I mean? Like they nobody said Vanilla Ice. You feel what I'm saying on the song? You feel me?
Nor
So
should they.
yeah. So it's just about just like even your interviews that you do, it's just a documentation of the history, and it can be done in many different ways. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to just be an interview. It doesn't have to just be a ledger. It can be through song, and you hear these references in the song, and it just shows people kind of like Just Ice going way back. Like if you don't hear the names, then they wasn't there. So putting these people's name out into the world, the atmosphere, or whatever, is just bringing life to them. I believe.
Okay. Makes sense. And with Cashflow, Buddha, and Shelter, the title track, I really appreciated and enjoyed how each of the three verses was tied to first verse Cashflow, second verse Buddha, third verse Shelter.
Yeah,
So how and why did you have the idea to do that creatively?
I'm a writer, man. That's what we do, man. Like, okay, we're looking at the puzzle. Okay, how can we make this make sense? And I want to say by the time it was like when Rob Swift sent back the cuts. It's just that's how I write, man. That's how like if you're gonna have that hook, what's a better way than I mean, it's just again, it's a layup. It's not a four name title. It's a three name title. So wow, you can do three verses. You know what I mean? So it was just again kind of a layup for a writer as far as like okay, cash flow, Buddha and shelter, cash flow, Buddha and shelter. That's three verses. Okay, boom, let's go. And you
Okay.
ain't even got to do a hook. So yeah, that was an easy one right there.
And with the cash flow part of Cashflow, Buddha, and Shelter, one of the lines you have in there is that you learn that money is just a tool.
Just a
So
tool.
do you remember how and when you discovered that and what that meant to you
Yeah.
at the time?
Yeah, again, I was working for JRL Enterprises in Pittsburgh, a minority-owned company, and for like a 7-year period, man, I'm just looking at all these enormous numbers for ordering parts for subway cars, bogies, BART out in San Francisco, to Orlando Airport, New York Transit. So these invoices are 30 million, 40 million. I'm walking from the office to the bank every week with these big ass checks, but I'm also looking at where the money's going. Like okay, you got a big invoice like this, doesn't mean all that's going to your pocket. You have material, you have costs, you have payroll, you have you have all the shit that comes with running a company. So I'm just watching how the money's moving shit and making shit happen like a hammer would hammer a nail in, like that's this that's how it kind of just started, like in the Matrix, when he saw the Matrix, you're just watching the money go to something and build something, or the money go to something and destroy something. And again, just like a hammer, you know what I mean? But again, it's just in another sense, it's just doing something bigger though. It's moving uh 50 people, 200 people in the airport, you know what I mean? So yeah, on a larger scale, man, the money as a tool, when I started seeing that, I kind of stopped tripping on the money. I wasn't rich. I wasn't rich at all. But I started seeing these numbers and looking at what I'm making, looking at what I have. Like, well, first of all, you're not gonna get anywhere close to that. So for you, you know what I mean? So it really put in perspective the type of money that I had.
Mm,
You know, like, oh, well, this company can write an $80 million check. I can barely write an $80 check. You know what I mean? So it put my money in perspective, like, well, damn, you don't got no money. And then I'm hanging out in the streets, dudes thinking they got money. I was like, and oh, Jay Sands, man, I got 2,000. I spent 2,000 at the club. Man, that's really not any money. You know what I mean? So it really did put money in perspective for me, as far as like its power, and also how it relates to me and what I have and what others have.
hmm. Yeah, and you also talk about that on Cash Flow, Buddha, and Shelter, how money can either build or destroy you.
Yeah,
Um, and with like you were just saying about being out in the streets, like, oh yeah, I just got 2,000 or I just spent 2,000 or whatever.
yeah,
And I think about that a lot too, because when people say they don't have any money, but then they just talked about how they spent all this money on something they don't even have anymore that doesn't
yeah.
appreciate or that is not even a good memory. Like
The
just
Beyonce tickets. You said, what'd you say? Nah, nah, shout out to Beyonce, she's the shit. But yeah, 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 exactly, man. I want to say one thing is that I didn't grow up with a lot, so I'm not a materialistic person. It wasn't important for me to have materials when I got older. I realized, hey, these girls still like me, and I'm broke, so fuck. You know what I mean? That's the easy part. So I never try to compete with the guys to have rims or have the chain or the why. I never got in that competition. It just never intrigued me. It never gave me any. Yeah, it just I'm competing, trying to find a beat. Like that. That's my competition. I was trying to find the perfect beat. So yeah, but never was competing with people in the streets and nothing like that.
well, to that exact point in Hey World, also on Cash Flow Builder and Shelter, you talk about thinking you can compete in the streets. And the
Yeah,
thing that growing up in Maryland and then now living in Los Angeles for a long time, the people that think that are usually so small and don't even understand the real games that even that they're in, that
yeah,
it's always baffled me that it's like you realize there's like four people above you in whatever you're doing just on what you're doing, not the big system of what's happening just in your little world. So with the Hey World, break that down as far as understanding that people think they're competing in the streets is the example you used, but to not even know the game that they're even actually playing.
yeah, yeah. That comes with what was you're hustling and you don't know the boss of. Yeah, man. That competing in the street stuff. It's about, like, for me at least, is that I had examples of people competing in the streets, from guys I went to high school with that got murdered in high school. Yeah, man. You just see the examples. I'm a great learner. Show me once, maybe twice, motherfucker, and you ain't going to worry about me anymore over in that area where he just got, you know what I mean? So I was definitely a great observer. I guess all writers are. We see the world, and we write. So I'm observing. I'm observing the bullshit people will go through, and most of it was caused by themselves. So, and most for me too. When I got in bullshit, it was usually some shit Jermaine did, and even now, if something goes haywire, I usually 99.9% of the time point the finger back at myself with like, well, whoever, whatever, motherfucker, you're the blame. I don't try to shift blame away from me because actually it's a waste of time to blame somebody and then try to look for an apology or some type of whatever from them. So accepting blame and accountability is definitely from the first verse about the shorty, the middle verse about the dude, and the last verse about the whole entire world. It's really about accountability. Like we have to have this accountability.